What happens to your testosterone if you drink alcohol daily? Alcohol can increase sexual confidence short term. That's the part everyone talks about. What almost no one talks about is what happens after weeks, then months of daily drinking. Not in your behavior, but inside your hormone system. This is the side of alcohol most people never notice, until something already feels off. Alcohol isn't food, it isn't a nutrient, and despite how often we use it that way, it isn't a relaxation aid either. Ethanol is a toxin, not in a moral sense, but in a biological one. The human body has never evolved a way to use alcohol as a building block. There is no storage system for it, no long-term benefit pathway. The only thing your body knows how to do with alcohol is neutralize it and get rid of it. The moment alcohol enters your bloodstream, your physiology reprioritizes. This isn't subtle, it's immediate. Your liver, brain, and nervous system shift their focus toward damage control. Not because your body hates pleasure, but because it's designed to survive first and optimize later. Carbohydrates can wait. Fat can be stored. Protein can be broken down gradually. Alcohol cannot. It's treated like an emergency, even when the dose is small and socially normalized. And when the body enters emergency mode, it pauses anything that isn't essential for keeping you alive right now. Muscle building slows. Tissue repair becomes less efficient. Sleep architecture degrades. And reproductive hormones, including testosterone, drop down the priority list. Testosterone doesn't help you survive tonight, but it determines how strong, driven, confident, and resilient you feel over months and years. That's why alcohol doesn't feel like a problem at first. And that's exactly why it becomes one later. Most people think testosterone lives in the testicles. Technically, that's true, but it's only the starting point. Testosterone production is controlled by a communication loop between the brain, the pituitary gland, and the testes. The hypothalamus sends a signal. The pituitary amplifies it through LH and FSH. And the testes respond by producing testosterone and sperm. But once testosterone enters circulation, it stops being just a reproductive hormone and becomes part of a much larger metabolic system. That's where the liver takes over. Your liver decides how much testosterone stays active, how quickly it's broken down, how much gets converted into estrogen, and how long it remains available to tissues. It regulates hormone-binding proteins like SHBG, which determine how much testosterone is actually free to do work. It also processes inflammatory signals that can blunt hormone receptor sensitivity throughout the body. So, when alcohol hits the liver, it doesn't just create detox stress. It interferes with the control center that determines hormone balance. That means alcohol doesn't need to directly damage the testicles to affect testosterone. It only needs to repeatedly stress the liver, and the liver will quietly reshape the hormonal environment from the top down. There's another layer here that almost never gets discussed. Your liver doesn't just manage hormones, it manages priorities. When alcohol enters the system, liver cells shift toward detoxification pathways that consume large amounts of NAD+, a molecule critical for normal metabolic function. When NAD+ is tied up processing alcohol, other processes slow down. Fat oxidation drops. Glucose handling changes. Hormone metabolism becomes less efficient. This matters because testosterone doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a metabolic environment. When liver metabolism is repeatedly diverted toward alcohol clearance, hormone balance becomes less precise. Testosterone may linger longer in bound forms, or get cleared faster in others. Estrogen metabolites may accumulate differently. The system becomes noisier, less efficient, less responsive. Nothing breaks, but nothing works optimally either. This is why daily drinking often creates a vague sense of something's off, long before a clear problem appears. Alcohol's most deceptive quality is that it works, at first. In the short term, alcohol reduces anxiety, increases social confidence, lowers inhibition, and enhances dopamine signaling. Conversations feel easier, stress feels muted. You feel more relaxed, more expressive, sometimes even more assertive. Those sensations overlap with how people describe higher testosterone. So the brain makes an easy mistake. It associates alcohol with strength, confidence, and relief. But that feeling isn't testosterone, it's temporary neurochemical manipulation. Alcohol directly alters neurotransmitter systems, especially dopamine and GABA. And whenever the brain is exposed to repeated artificial stimulation, it adapts. Receptors become less sensitive. Baseline chemistry shifts. What once felt like a reward slowly becomes a requirement, just to feel normal. This is the moment daily drinking stops being a conscious choice and starts becoming a physiological habit, even if consumption never increases and control is never lost. During the first days of daily drinking, most people notice nothing unusual. Energy feels normal, sleep seems fine, performance doesn't obviously drop, but inside the body, subtle trends begin. Alcohol slightly reduces the brain's signaling to produce testosterone. It lowers the release of GnRH and LH, just enough to matter over time. Not enough to cause a dramatic crash, just enough to shift the baseline downward if the pattern continues. At the same time, sleep quality begins to degrade. Alcohol often helps people fall asleep faster, but it disrupts the structure of sleep itself. Deep, slow-wave sleep becomes shorter. REM sleep is suppressed. Heart rate remains elevated at night. Micro-awakenings increase, even when you don't consciously remember them. This matters because testosterone production is tightly linked to sleep quality. The deepest phases of sleep are when testosterone pulses are strongest. Nightly drinking quietly steals that window. Night after night, stress hormones also begin to shift. Alcohol temporarily reduces the perception of stress, but the rebound effect increases sympathetic nervous system activity later. Over time, baseline cortisol levels rise. Cortisol tells the body to survive. Testosterone tells the body to build. When cortisol becomes chronic, testosterone loses priority. Here's what makes the first week especially deceptive. Your body is incredibly good at compensating in the short term. When testosterone signaling dips slightly, other systems step in. Adrenal hormones pick up some slack. Dopamine spikes cover fatigue. Motivation is propped up by habit and routine. You feel functional. But compensation always has a cost. The body can only mask imbalance for so long before it starts reallocating resources. And when resources get reallocated, they usually move away from things like muscle, libido, and long-term recovery, and towards stress tolerance and survival. That's why people often say, "I felt fine," until suddenly I didn't. In reality, nothing sudden happened. The compensation phase just ran out. After a few weeks, people often say the same thing. "I'm not drinking that much. I'm not hungover. But something feels off." Morning energy is lower. Motivation feels weaker. Training sessions feel heavier. Recovery takes longer. Confidence feels less automatic. Libido becomes inconsistent. Small irritations hit harder than they used to. This happens because testosterone doesn't act alone. It works within an environment. Even when total testosterone looks normal on paper, daily alcohol reshapes the internal conditions that determine how testosterone functions. Inflammation increases. Insulin sensitivity worsens. Visceral fat accumulation begins. Aromatase activity rises, converting more testosterone into estrogen. Hormone-binding proteins shift, reducing free testosterone. And androgen receptors become less responsive. So blood tests may look fine, but tissues respond differently. The hormone is present, but the message isn't landing the same way. This is also where many people start chasing the wrong solutions. They notice fatigue, lower drive, worse workouts, and assume the problem is age, motivation, or discipline. So they add caffeine, they add pre-workout, they add supplements, they add willpower. But the foundation hasn't changed. Daily alcohol keeps interrupting sleep quality, liver metabolism, and hormonal signaling. So every boost works less effectively than it should. This creates frustration. You're doing more, but getting less. That frustration often feeds back into stress, and stress further suppresses testosterone. The irony is brutal. The very habit used to relax is now amplifying the need for relaxation. Estrogen isn't the enemy. You need it for healthy bones, brain function, and cardiovascular stability. But problems arise when estrogen begins to dominate relative to testosterone. Daily alcohol promotes this shift gradually. It increases visceral fat storage, and visceral fat produces aromatase, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. Alcohol-driven inflammation further increases aromatase activity. Liver stress alters how hormones are cleared and recycled. As estrogen signaling rises, the brain interprets this as hormonal sufficiency and reduces LH output. Testosterone production slows. More testosterone gets converted. The ratio worsens. This feedback loop doesn't explode. It drifts. And drift is harder to notice than collapse. Another overlooked piece of this puzzle is timing. Hormonal shifts don't happen evenly throughout the day. Testosterone production follows circadian rhythms. Cortisol follows a rhythm. Estrogen signaling fluctuates. Alcohol disrupts these rhythms. Nighttime drinking flattens hormonal peaks and troughs. Testosterone pulses become weaker. Cortisol remains elevated later into the night. Melatonin release gets delayed. When circadian timing breaks down, hormones don't just change in amount. They lose coordination. Think of it like an orchestra. All the instruments are still there, but they're no longer playing in sync. The result isn't silence, it's noise, and noise is exhausting. After months of daily drinking, many people enter what could be called a low-test lifestyle, without ever being diagnosed with low testosterone. Sleep remains subtly disrupted. Inflammation stays elevated. Training quality declines slightly but consistently. Abdominal fat increases even without major weight gain. Recovery slows. You don't feel broken, you feel muted. Because strength training is one of the strongest natural supports for testosterone, reduced training intensity removes one of the body's key anabolic signals. And because testosterone influences motivation, the drop reinforces itself. This is why so many daily drinkers say, "I'm not doing anything different, but I'm softer, slower, and less driven." They're right, the system changed. By this point, many people adapt their expectations downward without realizing it. You stop expecting to feel energized in the morning. You stop expecting to feel aggressive in the gym. You stop expecting spontaneous desire. You tell yourself, this is just adulthood. But what's really happened is that your reference point has shifted. Your normal now includes lower baseline energy, muted motivation, slower recovery, softer body composition, more reliance on external stimulants. Because the change was gradual, it feels natural. But gradual doesn't mean inevitable. It means conditioned. Testosterone isn't just about muscle mass. It plays a major role in motivation, confidence, competitiveness, mood stability, and willingness to engage with challenge. Alcohol alters dopamine signaling over time. Receptors downregulate. Baseline reward sensitivity drops. Effort feels heavier. Training feels harder to start. Normal achievements feel less satisfying. And because alcohol remains the fastest way to feel relief, it becomes the default response to stress. Alcohol doesn't just suppress testosterone directly. It creates a lifestyle that suppresses everything testosterone needs to thrive: deep sleep, hard training, emotional resilience, and recovery. There's also a psychological layer worth mentioning. Testosterone influences how effort feels. Higher testosterone doesn't just make you stronger, it makes effort feel worth it. Tasks feel more rewarding. Resistance feels more engaging than draining. When testosterone signaling drops, effort starts feeling expensive. You don't avoid hard things because you're lazy. You avoid them because your brain calculates a worse return on investment. Daily alcohol subtly shifts that calculation. So, over time, life becomes more about comfort and less about challenge. And challenge is one of the strongest natural stimuli for testosterone production. The system slowly eats its own tail. Alcohol can increase sexual confidence in the short term, but daily drinking often reduces sexual performance over time. Sleep disruption lowers testosterone production. Prolactin may rise in some patterns. Nitric oxide signaling weakens, impairing blood flow. Nervous system balance shifts, reducing sensitivity and arousal. Many men describe it the same way. I still want sex, but the engine doesn't respond like it used to. That's not weakness. That's physiology adapting to a repeated signal. Fertility also takes a hit. Daily alcohol can reduce sperm quality, motility, and increase oxidative damage. Genetics and dose matter. But chronic exposure is never neutral. Sexual changes are often the first thing people can't rationalize away. You can explain fatigue, you can explain stress, you can explain weight gain. But when sexual response changes, it feels personal. The reality is that sexual function is one of the most sensitive indicators of hormonal health. It integrates sleep quality, nervous system balance, vascular function, testosterone signaling, and psychological state. That's why it's often the first system to signal that something deeper has shifted. Not because it's weak, but because it's honest. The most surprising part of this story is how reversible it often is. Within days, sleep begins to deepen. Nighttime heart rate drops. Morning energy improves. Within weeks, testosterone signaling rebounds. Cortisol load decreases. Recovery improves. Libido stabilizes. Motivation returns. Within months, inflammation drops. Body composition shifts leaner. Hormone ratios normalize, and drive becomes more consistent. Many people don't realize how much alcohol affected them until it's gone. It's like carrying a small weight every day, until you put it down and suddenly remember how light movement used to feel. One of the most surprising experiences people report after removing daily alcohol is mental clarity. Not just less anxiety, but sharper decision-making. This happens because sleep architecture begins to normalize. Dopamine signaling stabilizes. Cortisol rhythms improve. Testosterone signaling rebounds. And when those systems realign, effort feels lighter again. You don't suddenly become superhuman. You just stop fighting invisible resistance. That's the difference. Occasional drinking is often manageable. Daily drinking trains adaptation. And biology always adapts to what you repeat. If you repeat nightly toxin processing, sleep disruption, and hormonal interference, your body will reset its baseline around that reality. That baseline becomes your normal, until one day, you wonder why you don't feel like you used to. This entire discussion isn't about morality. It's not about labeling alcohol as good or bad. It's about understanding biological trade-offs. Alcohol trades short-term relief for long-term suppression, and daily repetition magnifies that trade. When you understand the trade, you get to choose consciously. That's the point of science. Not fear, not shame, just clarity. Low testosterone isn't just less muscle. It's less drive, less resilience, worse mood, more fat gain, poorer sleep, less joy. Daily alcohol doesn't push you there violently. It pulls you there slowly. You don't need perfection. You just need to stop calling a nightly hormone drain relaxation. If you made it to the end, you're already ahead. Now ask yourself, if you drink alcohol regularly, have you noticed changes in your energy, drive, or libido over time? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments, like the video, subscribe for science that explains what your body is actually doing.